Every day, citizens around the country are faced with new dilemmas. Dilemmas that affect them profoundly. Whether it's injustice, discrimination, falling through the cracks, scandals and cronyism, balances of power, ethics, religious freedoms, state versus citizens, and unfunded mandates, and the list goes on and on and on. Welcome to Speak Up. It's directed at those who have fallen through the cracks, and it gives them a voice. It's your turn to speak up, to stand up and fight back. And welcome back to Speak Up. I'm Kevin Avard, and I'm going to be interviewing a candidate for sheriff, and your name is?
Frank Szabo.
Szabo. Yes. You know, every time I look at it, I think, okay, how do I spell that?
Yeah, ignore the S.
Right. So, Frank, you're running for sheriff here in New Hampshire.
Yes, in Hillsborough County.
Hillsborough County.
Yes.
Why are you running?
I actually moved up to New Hampshire to start an organic farm, and there is an actual all-out attack on small family farms throughout the country, and there's so many examples that I talk about where small family farms are being targeted. They're basically being put out of business, and I realized that my farm is not going to survive for very long. I was aware of the authority of the sheriff when I was down in Pennsylvania. There was organizations I was involved with there, and so basically I'm running because nobody else is able to protect people from some of these actions.
What is actually going on with the farms?
Well, for example, one of the most horrendous examples I talk about recently in Michigan, there were state authorities back in April, just of this year, made a determination that certain breeds of pigs, basically what's referred to as heritage pigs, or the kind that our grandparents used to raise, are now considered an invasive species. And keep in mind, these are the ones that are not raised in factory farms.
Okay.
That these are now an invasive species, and they showed up later in the month with SWAT teams, guns drawn, forcing these farmers to destroy their own pigs.
Now, I know that there's an epidemic of the hogs running wild. If you,
yes,
seriously, in
certain areas, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Is this the same thing?
No, this is not. These are pigs that were on farms, and the one video, the farmer's talking about the fact that if his pigs ever got out of the fencing, they run to the house to go get treats. Right. They don't go run wild. They know where their food comes from. So
they're domesticated.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
But for some reason, the feds.
No, the state.
The state.
This was state authorities that did this.
Okay.
And gross violation of private property rights. Another example, again, recently in August, a man in rural Oregon was put in jail for 30 days and fined $1,500 for collecting rainwater on his own property. And some of these public officials create these regulations, and people don't have any way to get around it, to avoid it, grossly unconstitutional. But the sheriff has the authority to protect the people from things like that.
What's happening here in New Hampshire?
Nothing specifically that I can bring anybody's attention to, but that certainly doesn't mean that it couldn't happen here. Right. Another example, again, my concentration has been around farming, so these are the examples I know of, but there's some farmers markets that have been targeted because they deal in a lot of cash. And one particular farmers market had about $70-some thousand taken out of their account, I believe it was by the IRS, simply because they dealt in so much cash. It was determined that there was no laws were being broken, no criminal activity, and it was supposedly under the auspices of combating terrorism, but the IRS still sued to keep $60-some thousand, just for the fun of it. And the average person has no idea what to do. They're trying to run their own lives, run their own businesses, and these are some of the things that are going on. And specifically, federal agencies, one of the things I talk about, and I guess a campaign promise, if you will, the county sheriff's authority is such that day one in office, I will notify every federal agency that they will not come into Hillsborough County unless they go through the office of the sheriff.
Now, the sheriff's office has that authority?
Absolutely. A little bit of history, the office of the sheriff is actually an ancient position and dates all the way back to England, when the sheriff had always been there to protect the rights and the property of the king. After the revolution, we became the sovereign citizens. The office of the sheriff remained, but now they're there to protect the rights and the property of the citizens. Because the office predates the Constitution, it's not specifically detailed in the Constitution as to what the authority is and all that. However, there's lots of documents, lots of court cases, and one document specifically that I talk about is called Anderson on Sheriffs. It's a document that was written by an attorney that practiced before the U.S. Supreme Court back in the 40s. And his name was Walter Anderson. And he created this document. Personally, I believe it was because he saw what was coming, rights being eroded, and wanted to make sure that people understood what the office of the sheriff was all about and what the duties and responsibilities were. And in no uncertain terms, the document presents the fact, backed up with court cases, that the sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer of the county, has no superior in the county, reports directly to the people, not to another public official.
Not the Attorney General.
Not the Attorney General. They are the chief law enforcement officer of the county. They report only to the people that put them in office. And they are duty-bound and fully authorized to protect the rights, the property, and the citizens themselves from any unlawful action. And they actually have the authority to determine that if, especially a government action, is unconstitutional, that they block it.
Now, is this under common law?
Absolutely. A big part of it is under common law, and the office of the sheriff has some authorities and some privileges, if you will, that are based in common law. And it's because of that that the sheriff has this authority. Again, the office itself predates the Constitution. The sheriff swears an oath of office, just like every public official, to uphold and defend the Constitution of New Hampshire as well as the United States of America. So those are the primary laws that the sheriff looks to determine whether something more recent is lawful or not. But the sheriff has that authority to protect the people from a rogue agent, a government agent that might think that they're doing their job, might think that they're doing a good thing or a service to the people, but in reality, they're violating someone's constitutional...
Like the Banking Commission? Or the Attorney General's office? Or the state police?
Any agency could be violating someone's rights. And one example, again, that the sheriff's office absolutely has authority over is some of the mortgage foreclosures that are going on. And
that's why I brought up the Banking Commission.
Well, but more specific to that, directly at how it affects an individual, people are having their homes taken away from them, and some of these people have never even had a mortgage.
We had a lady come on the show, Marie Miller. She was talking about the sheriff was giving her a notice, and because the mortgage company was going to be taking her home. Mm-hmm. They didn't even have a title.
Absolutely.
And that became quite an issue. And we also had another individual, Mr. Frost, who was actually, they raided his house, his personal files, because they were just being a little bit more aggressive. They were
overzealous,
you think? But if he would have called the sheriff's department, would they have stopped the aggressiveness?
If I'm in the office, absolutely. That's what the sheriff's supposed to be doing.
But then, does that make you judge, jury?
No, absolutely not. Again, the office of the sheriff is just as much bound to uphold and defend the Constitution as any other public official. The point is that the county sheriff has the authority to ensure that other public officials honor their oath of office. And getting back to the mortgage foreclosures, all mortgage foreclosures in the county go through the office of the sheriff. And one of the things I will do, so easy to do, is require that every mortgage foreclosure that comes through that office have documentation showing clear title.
That is one of the cases, that is one of the problems that a lot of people don't understand, that seniors, they're either refinancing, they're doing something where the mortgage company will collect 3 checks, they won't cash them, with the mortgage modification, and after they don't cash them, then they'll come back and they'll say, no, your loan's been rejected. Okay. I don't know what the number is, why 3? And then all of a sudden, here's the notice of a foreclosure. And they took your home because of non-payment, even though you made the payments.
Right.
and they're scratching their head, thinking, what's going on here?
Right.
Now, this was brought up before Dave Wheeler, the executive counselor, and he's very aware of this. 60 Minutes has done an hour show on this mortgage fraud that's going across the country. It's not just here in New Hampshire. It's widespread. And for some reason, it's not being reported on as often. But you're saying that you can protect the individual's property.
Without question. If there is not clear title, that mortgage company does not have a claim to that property.
You won't serve the papers of foreclosure.
That would be a violation of my oath.
Right.
Because the property belongs to the person living there, not to the mortgage company that doesn't have clear title. One of the other issues, especially with some of the larger banks, is rather than individually paying a recording fee to the county as they are supposed to, they went through a recording service and sort of recorded deeds in bulk. Make a long story short.
Yeah, that's like a money laundering thing.
Yeah.
Right?
But bottom line is they lost clear title along the way.
Right.
Because of the process and the procedures that they followed, again, trying to avoid paying the recording fee to the county. So a lot of these banks don't have clear title, yet they're still foreclosing, and a judge should never allow that. The judge should be requiring that clear title be documented.
Right. Well, that's what happened in the Miller case as well.
Right.
They weren't able to show, and they also didn't show up for the trial or the hearing, and the proof and the whole 9 yards. And so she still was giving the paper saying, look, you need to evacuate.
Right.
And it was just the perfect storm for her, but it brought to light, and come to find out, it's happening across the country.
Right. It's much more prevalent than people realize.
So what are the other areas that you would be,
Well, as I said, and one of the things, let me back up for a second. There was an article I wrote recently to try and help people understand my perspective and my understanding of the Constitution. And it was titled, "There's no such thing as constitutional rights." The Constitution is a document which created the government. The people got together and said, we want to form a community. Let's form our local municipal government. Let's form our state government. The state governments then formed the federal government. The federal government, first of all, was never supposed to have any direct access to the citizens. That's not how it worked. But the Constitution created the government. It is the binding and the limits for that creation. So to use the term constitutional rights means that that document somehow determines what a person, a human being, has or doesn't have. And that's not what the Constitution is. The rights specifically enumerated in the Constitution are the ones that the founders determined were the most important for the continuance of freedom and liberty. Those were the ones that the government absolutely should never touch, not even come close. The other misconception is that the Constitution is somewhat all-inclusive in what it spells out. There's no way the Constitution could be all-inclusive with the enumerated rights that are listed. The inalienable rights that people have simply by virtue of being alive, you can't count them all. Again, it's not government's place to tell you what right you have and you don't have. But one of the other examples is, again, it's unfortunate, is your child wants to sell lemonade in front of your house. Well, there are municipalities that say, no, you have to have a license to sell lemonade. Gross violation of property rights. And how can you teach your child about business and responsibility and, again, dealing with people, so many aspects to simply selling lemonade, yet someone's right to teach their child that is being infringed on, plus the property rights. Private property is private property for a reason. Again, another example, the sheriff is supposed to be telling these public officials what you're doing is not constitutional. And that's part of the authority of the sheriff.
How do you work with the state police and the courts? How does that
Well, the primary job, if you will, and sort of at a minimum, the job of the sheriff and the office of the sheriff is to ensure that civil process works properly.
Okay.
And that the courts are protected, that the county jail runs properly, that the public funds are used appropriately. The sheriff is also basically an administrator and has a large budget to make sure, again, that the funds are used appropriately. In my opinion, as I said, that's at a bare minimum. The sheriff absolutely needs to cooperate with other law enforcement agencies. There's lots of services that are provided for protection of the people by the Office of the Sheriff at the county level, but also state agencies and federal agencies. And I'm not saying that the county sheriff needs to block that. What I'm saying is that when any of these agencies, no matter whether it's local, state, or federal, if their action is a violation of someone's rights, if they're pulling people off on the side of the road to do a checkpoint, but there's no indication of a wrong being done,
no probable cause,
no probable cause, no crime being committed, they are absolutely violating that person's right to travel. The county sheriff is supposed to be making sure that that does not happen.
But that happens all the time.
And that's the problem. It happens all the time, but it's not supposed to be. People should feel free to travel when they want without having papers. That's not...
Show me your documents. Where have we seen that before?
Yes, yes, and the signs are there. And
so tell me a little bit about your campaign. Where, this is your first attempt.
Yes.
Have you gotten a lot of support?
Actually, support has increased very recently. It has very much increased, and I actually had a gentleman that hasn't even known me a month that showed up at my house and told me that he took a leave of absence from his job to volunteer full-time on my campaign, and also gave a sizable donation, and that really hit me. And lots of other people are finding out about authority of the sheriff and are hearing that there's a public official with authority that can protect them from some of these things that are going on that most people have no concept of where to go and how to defend themselves properly. And the idea that there is someone that is there supposed to be protecting them is very attractive.
In some of the states, the sheriff seems to have a little bit more authority. If you go down south, he's the ruler, boy.
People talk about Florida and Texas specifically.
Right.
But again, it doesn't matter what county you live in or what state you live in. All county sheriffs have the same authority. Some sheriffs exercise more of their true nature and authority than others. Some sheriffs are basically led to believe that the basic responsibilities I talked about, that's as far as their job goes, and that's it.
So the sheriff is more than just transporting prisoners
Absolutely.
from A to B or serving
Right.
papers. They're not clerical. They have an active role
Correct.
in law enforcement
Right.
and protecting liberty,
Yes.
which seems to add a little bit more color to the job.
It does. And again, most people are not aware of that. So part of my job in the campaign has been education, first and foremost, for the general public as well as public officials. And again, it's been an eye-opener for most people.
Now, prior to farming, or have you done farming all your life?
No, actually, farming is my focus, but personally I'm not a farmer per se. I actually have a business background. University degree from Pennsylvania, and I was in sales at first and started a limousine service and ran that for about 12, 13 years. And so basically entrepreneur. Budgets are a no-brainer. The administrative aspects of the Office of the Sheriff is not a challenge. My focus has been the constitutional aspect and understanding the law, how it's written, why it was written, and how to properly interpret it.
That'll be quite a change from you going from the private sector
Sure.
into a government job where you're not only working with public officials, you're also working with the county commission,
Sure.
the whole 9 yards, and working
Right.
with politicians.
Right.
That'll be quite a change.
I'm an easygoing person. I feel that I can get along with pretty much anybody. And again, I'm very much aware of the fact that the county sheriff is one part of the whole picture. As I said, it has aspects to it that are very unique.
Being the sheriff, you're going to have deputies.
Yes, yeah, there's about 30-some deputies currently.
What is going to be your role? You're going to be taking on, if you're elected, with a different perspective. Are you going to pass that perspective down to each deputy as far as their roles? Will there be a certain training? Will there be a certain, what are you going to do?
Sure. One of my degrees, if you will, is in personnel and labor relations. And I will rely heavily on the experience of the deputies that have been there for years. And sometimes you have a sheriff that loses an election, the deputies continue, they make the office run.
Right.
The deputies are certified law enforcement officers. They know that aspect of the job, and any good manager doesn't have to know every little aspect of what someone does to be able to manage them effectively. But I would rely heavily on their knowledge and their experience. And however, from the background that I have, one of the aspects, I was just at a meeting of some people that own rental properties, Property Owners Association, and one of their issues is the lack of responsiveness that they're seeing sometimes when they have legal papers that need to be filed. Again, they're kind of feeling that they're in between, and they're on strict time schedules that they have to jump to, and just that level of customer service is something that I feel there's no reason the Office of the Sheriff shouldn't encompass as well.
So you'll make that as one of your priorities, one of the priorities of the deputies too?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a priority. Again, there's so many other aspects that need to be looked at first, but
Right.
definitely being more responsive to the citizens who would put me in office in the first place.
Right.
But the office is supposed to be there to make sure that civil process works properly, and the sheriff is required to serve papers as they are submitted from the courts. And one example was that the court order was not being followed, and the individual property owner, the rental property owner, felt that they had no recourse to try and get the order from the judge enforced as it was ordered by the judge.
Right.
So again, the aspect that I would bring to it is the fact that we need to be responsive to the people that we're serving, and we're not serving the courts, we're serving the citizens.
Right. So what can you recommend for our viewers to read or to research? I mean,
Sure.
obviously they can go online. They can.
Right,
But,
right.
Is there a certain direction as far as reputable organizations that
Right.
have
Don't
talked?
don't take my word for it.
Right.
Absolutely. On my website, there's lots of documents that I reference, and it was actually just during the campaign that I found out this document, Anderson on Sheriffs, is online, and it's the entire document. It's 2 huge volumes. It's actually viewable online through one of those organizations I mentioned in Pennsylvania. But everything that I present, I document, and specifically Anderson on Sheriffs is full of court cases. Again, this was an attorney that wrote it. He wanted to make sure every tenant that he presented was backed up with documentation. Also, in addition, there's a court case that was in 94, I believe, 1994, before the U.S. Supreme Court. It's called Prince Mack versus USA, and some people are aware of Sheriff Richard Mack. He basically was one of the people there. And to make a long story short, the U.S. Supreme Court in 1994 recognized that the sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer of the county and cannot be directed by a federal agency.
So Homeland Security can't come in and say, hey, it's our show now.
Only if the sheriff allows it.
Interesting. Very
If the
interesting.
sheriff blocks something that is grossly unconstitutional, it will not happen. That's the authority of the sheriff. But at any rate, so on the website, there's information. On my Facebook page, there's additional things. I'm trying to clean up the website a bit and haven't had a lot of time to do that. It was just redesigned last week, so I'm still working on some things. But there's an article that I wrote, I think about a week ago, that pulls out some of the specific sections of Anderson on Sheriffs that are the most important about the authority, where it comes from, what the sheriff's supposed to be doing. And again, these are all referencing back to Anderson. But there are other documents of similar nature talking about the authority of the sheriff. But again, it's not in your local library.
So what is your website?
The website is szaboforsheriff.com. It's S-Z-A-B-O. And sheriff is S-H-E-R-I-F-F. And again, people can go to the website, and if anybody has a question, they can certainly send me an email.
And your Facebook is open?
Facebook, if they go to the website, they can connect then to the Facebook page. And I think it's Frank W. Szabo for Sheriff of Hillsborough County is the Facebook page. But again, there's...
Are you on Twitter?
I don't know anything about Twitter. I need to, I know, but I'm not that techie.
I don't think it's that techy at all. Copy, paste, tweet.
I don't even text.
Right.
So, yeah. I like books, but so they can go to the website, find out more information, and again, any questions whatsoever, ask me, send me emails, and I hope they'll investigate it further.
Are you still receiving contributions?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, please. Thanks for bringing that up.
And sign
Yes.
locations.
Yes, and if someone would like, we have the yard sign certainly, and if someone would like, to have a yard sign, to let us know, and we'll have it delivered.
Great. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show and talking a little bit about your campaign. And for our viewers, if you want to contribute to Frank's campaign, by all means, or get in touch with him and talk with him.
Yes.
Look him in the eye. And so until until next week, we thank you for watching Speak Up, and good luck with your campaign.
Thank you very much.
All right. Take care. Good.
Every day, citizens around the country are faced with new dilemmas. Dilemmas that affect them profoundly. Whether it's injustice, discrimination, falling through the cracks, scandals and cronyism, balances of power, ethics, religious freedoms, state versus citizens, and unfunded mandates, and the list goes on and on and on. Welcome to Speak Up. It's directed at those who have fallen through the cracks, and it gives them a voice. It's your turn to speak up, to stand up and fight back.